So a couple more things I wanted to show you before we finish up here. Let's try and just get that more even. Okay, so what else can we do? So what we can also do is use text boxes as well to set things. Now I kind of already covered this in episode 1 with the Sonic mod tool, but just want to go over it again because, you know, this whole segment is on using different UI elements. So let's go ahead and try to do that. So what we can do this with is binds actually. So right here I had an option to bind no clip to a button. So what we can do is we can create our own little custom bind creator where we can bind different things to buttons, and we can use a bunch of different UI elements for this. For example, let's use we can use a combo box to select what button that we want to bind something to, and then a text box for the dvar that we want to bind, and then a button to set that on the console. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll call this button binds. So we've got button binds, and we've got this combo box which will be our button. So there is text that we can actually put in these boxes if we wanted to, just to tell people like what you want to type in here. So like select button or something. If there's enough room for that, maybe. Just there, yep. So select button. And then inside the items on this, what we can do is we can put the different buttons that we want to bind. So we'll delete all these weapons from this one. So what buttons do we have? So okay, I'm not going to add all the buttons on the controller because this is just for an example. I'll just use some basic ones like button underscore A, button underscore B, button underscore X, and we'll go button underscore Y. Whoa, button underscore Y. Right, so we'll just do these 4 buttons for an example. So we'll add those into our weapons selector, and then we will create a text box. So let's look for something called text box X. It would just be called a normal text box if it was if we were using Windows. To make this a little bit bigger, if we can go into the font and change the font size, maybe make it 9, which will make that a little bit bigger. It's probably not going to be an exact match for that, but that'll kind of do roughly. And then we can add watermark text because this is a .NET Bar toolbox item, so we can add watermark text. So this is going to be dvar. So this is the dvar that someone's going to type in. And then finally we can have a button to set that on the console. So we'll call this set bind. And yeah, that will do. So again, doesn't look perfect because we're using different UI elements. One is a Windows element and the other is a .NET Bar one, but that's the only thing. Normally I would use probably like a Dev Express drop down combo box because they're better, but so the .NET Bar ones just suck because you can't just paste a big list in like you can do with the Windows ones. Okay, so this should probably do fine though. We've got our drop down menu, our drop down list that's going to give us the different buttons that we can bind. We've got the dvar that we want to bind and then the button that's going to set that. So we'll call this button selector, and then we'll call this text box, we're going to call this dvar or dvar input or something, and then the button binds is just going to be set bind like that. So we'll double click this and create our code. Again, we'll just quickly copy and paste the try and catch exception for quickness. So what we're going to do here is we're going to send CMD, and the CMD, what we're sending is to bind. So we're going to do the keyword bind, and then normally we would do bind and then the button name. So say if it was button underscore A, it would be button underscore A, but we're taking that information from our button selector. So we're going to do plus button selector dot selected item, and then what we can do is, again, we're going to do plus, so it's the button plus, and then we actually have to add a space, because if we just did the button plus the dvar, then they would be joined together. We need to make sure there's a space, so we have to add just a space in between them, and then we can add the next thing, which is our dvar input, so dvar input.text, and that should allow us to bind different dvars that we enter into that text box to whatever button we select. So let's give this a shot. So select button, I will select the A button, and I'm going to bind no clip to A. So if I say the dvar no clip and then set bind, if I press A, I am now in no clip. There we go, that worked perfectly. So let's say I want to bind God mode to B. Then I can say B, button B, I want God mode. Set bind. Now if I press B on my controller, God mode off because it was already on. Press it again, and God mode is on. Okay, so there you go, God mode on, God mode off by pressing B, and if I press A, no clip is on. And then I could also do something like, let's say I want to bind Y to third person, CG underscore third person 1, or no, in fact I can just use toggle space CG underscore third person, set bind, I press Y button, I'm in third person, press Y again, and I'm back to first person. So there you go. That's how you can use different UI elements like combo boxes, text boxes, and sliders in order to just make a more efficient tool. Actually, make sure it just makes things easier in many respects. I think a lot of people stay away from using different combo boxes, people who are new to maybe C#, who just use buttons because they think it's easier. They think using combo boxes and using different UI elements is hard, but really it makes things easier in the long run once you learn how to use them. So one last thing I want to show you is how to make sliders floats, because a lot of mods are done using float values, which have decimal points in them, which you can't really use a slider for by default, because sliders use integers. They're just, 0 to 100, 0 to 1000. So it's kind of difficult to use a slider when it's a float value. So I'm just going to show you how to do that, and then that will be us done for this video. So we're going to go ahead and grab this. I'm going to copy and paste it. And just try and realign this back up. Okay, so for this example, I'm going to use timescale because that's a float value. In the previous episode, we looked at timescale. In fact, it's right here, slow motion. We looked at using slow motion. So you can see the values for timescale are decimals. So 0.2, 1.1 is the default value. So in order to do that in a slider, because this wouldn't normally work if we were just doing, if we would still be able to use integers, but if we just used a slider, then it would set it from 0 to whatever, say it was 10, 0 to 10, then you would never be able to do slow motion, because slow motion is 0 point something, and it can only ever be 0 or 1 if it's an integer. So it can only be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So you're never going to be able to get slow motion working unless you convert it to a float. So let's go ahead and do that. So we've got game speed, and we're going to set this to timescale. So we've got timescale, and we're going to call this our timescale slider. Timescale slider. And this will be set timescale. I know I'm very inconsistent with naming conventions, like naming variables to it in a specific way. I mix and match them all the time. I know that's bad practice, but I can't get out of the habit of doing that. So anyway, set timescale. Okay, so I'm going to double click the button again, and we'll copy our code over. Okay, so in here we would normally have timescale is the dvar, so we'd put timescale space, and then we would normally have the value, which in normal cases would just be plus the slider, which was timescale slider dot value. So this is what we would normally set it to, and then we also need to make sure that we have this set, so it's still set from 0 to 800 because we copied it from the game speed slider. So we're going to have to change this. So the minimum value, we still want it to be 0, but we want it to go up by like 0.1, 0.2 each increment instead of 0, 1, 2, 3. So our maximum value, so this is going to be a bit confusing. So what we want it to be for timescale is we want it to be about, let's just say, for example, right now, we'll just do 0 to 100. We'll do 0 to 100 or 0 to 10, actually. Let's try 0 to 10, set timescale. And then instead of doing timescale slider dot value, what we want to do is we want to cast it as a float. So to do that, we just do open and close brackets and put float in there, and that will cast it as a float. But then we also want to divide it by 10. So if we do / space 10, that divides it by 10. And now if I do this, we'll have a look at the, oh, in fact, we need to set the value, or I'll just message box it out right now just to show you. Message box.show, and then we'll just show this to show what value it's setting it to, so we can test to make sure we're getting the right thing. Actually, that's not going to work because float value equals float divided by 10, and then we'll do value dot toString, because message boxes expect a string, so it needs to be dot toString at the end. So let's have a look and see what we get. So if we set this, say here, set timescale 0.2. So if we set it here, we got 0. If we go 1 increment forward, we get 0.1. Go 1 more increment forward, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. So there we go. We know that that is actually working properly. Now, one thing we need to do is we need to try and again get the middle value to be the default value. So in that case, let's see, 1.1 is the default value. So we got 0 to 10. So let's see, 0 to 10, what are we getting with 0 to 10? And my maths is terrible, guys, I do apologize. 0 to 10, let's see, that's, so when we get to about here, our middle value is 0.5, so we really want that to be double. So we want it to be maybe about 20 or 21, so the middle value is 1.1, or 1 at least. Let's see, our middle value here is 1.1. Okay, there we go, perfect. So then, so now that we have it set to 1.1 in the middle here, then we can easily switch it. So if we want to go slow-mo, then we just set it further down. If we want it to go faster speed, then we set it further up. So just to finish this one off, because we know that that's working now, we can cut this out. What we'll do is we'll again want to set the label, which again I haven't renamed. I should have done that. So this is our timescale label. Okay, so what we also want to do is set our timescale here to whatever the value of the slider is. So the most efficient way to do that would be to create a float called value, which is going to equal this, which is the slider value. So that what we can do then is we can just say value here. So we can just say that we want the value here. So by doing this, we're storing the float of the slider value inside a float variable called value. That way we can just call value whenever we want to get the value of the slider, rather than having to do this twice, because normally we'd have to do this twice, once for actually setting the value in the CMD, and the second time to set the label to the value. So rather than do that, we'll just do it once and store it in a variable called value, and then we'll just call value twice, once for the CMD and once for the label. So to do that, I'll just say, what was it called? It was called timescale label, not timescale slider, timescale label dot text will equal, and again we want it to equal the name as it is normally. So we want it to equal timescale and then plus our value, which is value. And there we go. So now the label should also print out whatever value the timescale is on. And if we set it to that, there we go, 1.4, 1.1. And another thing I forgot to do was set the default value of the slider to whatever the default value of timescale is, which is 1.1. However, that will not be 1.1 here because this is still using integers, so it'll be half of 21, which we can't really do. So we can't really set it to the default value exactly. So we'll just have to set it to 10, which is as close as we can get, because you can't half 21 if you're using integers. So let's see, default value we'll set to 10, which should be as close as possible. So that'll be 1.0 probably, so we click that. Yeah, 1.1 is the default value. So there we go. Let's test this, see if this works. So we'll resume game, so it's kind of, game's running normally. And then if we want slow-mo, we can just drag the slider down, click apply, and now I'm in slow-mo. You can see how slow the shots are firing. Can go even slower, all the way down to 0.1, which is as slow as it's going to go, basically. You can probably hear that. That's me holding down the trigger as well, it's going that slow. And then of course I can speed it all the way up to here. You can hear how fast that's firing now. All the way up to 2.1. Which is as fast as you're pretty much going to need to go from timescale. And then if I want to set it back to the default, all I have to do is drag it back to that middle marker, and boom, we're on 1.1, back to normal speed. Okay, so yeah, that is just a basic example of using different UI elements in your programs. I just wanted to show you that, guys, because it really does help out, and it helps you make a more interesting tool when you've got all these different UI elements that you can play around with. It can also help make your life easier when you're coding as well, especially when it comes to when you have big lists of weapon codes that you want to add. You don't have to create a separate button for each one. You can just drop it all in a combo box, which is really, really useful. That'll be it for this video. Now, one thing I forgot to do was disable focus rectangles. Where are you? I can't stand these things. Focus keys enabled. Turn those off so that these sliders are not highlighted with the little dotted lines when you're moving these around. So another thing that we should have done from the beginning, which I kind of forgot to do, was make the value for the label of what the slider is on change when you change the slider rather than when you click the button, because when you click the button you have to click the button first to know what the value is. And really what we should have done is made it so that when we just change the slider value, it changes the value on the label, so that you know before you click the button what value you're about to set. I really should have done that to begin with, I apologize. So let's just do that now, just so that we can have everything sorted. So all you have to do is basically just cut the label where we change the label to the slider value, take it out of the button, and instead we will put it in the actual slider itself. So if you double click the slider, it will create the method for every time the slider changes, and then just put the label value changing, just put the code for the label to change by the slider value in here instead. And then we'll do the same with timescale. So set timescale, we'll take the label out. We'll also have to copy the float value as well for this one, and double click timescale. So when the timescale value is changed, we will do the same thing. So now when we run this, you'll see that when we change the value here, the number is changing before we've even clicked the button, we know exactly what number it changes. That's just a lot better. Even this one's got 0.1, 1.1, much better than how we were doing it before. So yeah, that'll do it for this video, guys. So yeah, it just helps you make a more interesting, nice looking tool. It's just more efficient to use different UI elements for different things. They work better with different things like game speed and time scale, and a big weapon list, which is better than creating a separate button for each weapon and stuff like that. So anyway, guys, if you did like this video or you found the information useful, I hope you were able to follow it, because I know I did kind of go into maybe a bit too much detail with the whole float conversion thing, and I apologize if that was a bit too much at this early stage of coding tutorials. Let me know what you think in the comments. If I'm going a bit too fast, I do apologize if that is the case, and I'll try and slow it down for the next episode. But anyway, if you enjoyed the video or you found the information useful, go ahead and leave it a like. I really do appreciate that. And subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. Comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
I'm shuffling.